I smelled them before I ever opened the door. That's the detail nobody at the trial wanted to hear, so I stopped offering it. But it's the truth, and it's where this has to start, because everything after makes a different kind of sense once you know the smell came first. Swedish. Wet. The smell of something that had gone soft in the back of a fridge and been left there anyway. I remember standing in my kitchen with the buzzer humming through the wall and thinking, absurdly, that someone in the building must have let a bag of garbage sit too long in the heat. I didn't know yet that the smell wasn't going to leave. I didn't know it was going to get into my couch, my jacket, the inside of my own skull, and stay there for the rest of whatever life I've got left in this cell. I just stood there, 29 years old, mildly annoyed, waiting to meet the new neighbors. My name is Dave. This happened in Larkspur, a town small enough that everyone still calls the walk-up apartments on Alder Street the new building, even though it went up sometime in the 80s. 4 floors, no elevator, thin walls that let you track your neighbors' lives by sound alone. I'd lived there 2 years. I liked it. I want that on record, because it matters later. I liked my life before that Saturday. It was raining the night the new tenants moved in. Not a drizzle. A real Canadian October downpour, the kind that turns Alder Street into a shallow black river and sends every drain in a 3-block radius into open revolt. I was on the couch with a coffee, enjoying the first quiet evening I'd had in a month, when a van pulled up outside Dice. Dark windows. No hurry to it at all, like the weather wasn't their problem. 2 people got out and stood on the sidewalk in the rain without covering their heads. 5 minutes later, my buzzer went. Yeah. Evening? A man's voice, old, unhurried, each word set down like he was choosing it fresh. Sorry for the hour. We're the new tenants, Unit 23. The lawyer's office said you're holding the spare key for us. That was true, technically. Mrs. Frayne, who'd lived in 23 for as long as anyone could remember, had passed away the week before, quietly in her sleep. The kind of death nobody in the building even noticed until the smell of her mail piling up gave it away. Her nephew's lawyer had dropped a spare key with me, since I was the closest unit with someone reliably home. I hadn't expected the new people so soon. I buzzed them in. Their footsteps came up the stairs even. Confident. Not a single hesitation on the landing where the carpet bunches up and trips every single person who's ever climbed those stairs for the first time, including me the day I moved in. They didn't trip. They didn't even slow down. I opened the door to an old man in a gray cardigan, hand already extended. "Stan," he said. "This is my wife." His grip was cold and dry, in a way that skin isn't supposed to be. Dry the way old paper is dry. He smiled a half-second too long. Behind him, a small, silver-haired woman stood at the bottom of the stairs, not coming up, just watching me with an attention that felt less like politeness and more like appraisal, the way you'd look at a used car before deciding on a price. "Sorry to bother you so late," Stan said. Storm had the highway backed up for an hour. I handed him the key. He thanked me, apologized again for the hour, and the 2 of them went up. I remember thinking, closing my door, that they seemed harmless enough. Quiet, even. A relief after Mrs. Frayne's television, which she used to run at a volume that suggested she'd gone half-deaf sometime around the Mulroney years. I went to bed early, looking forward to a full night's sleep for once. I was wrong about that within the hour. Something heavy hit the floor above me around 1 in the morning, a single flat thud, the kind a dropped sack of something makes. Not furniture, not footsteps. I lay there in the dark, waiting for a second thud that would tell me it was just moving boxes. It didn't come. Eventually I decided that's exactly what it had to be, because the only alternative was to lie awake wondering, and I had work at 8. That was the last full night's sleep I got in that apartment. The knocking started before 8 the next morning. I opened the door, expecting a noise complaint aimed the wrong direction, and found the old woman instead, standing closer to my door than felt necessary, her voice coming out with a strange, visible effort, like speaking cost her something. "Our television," she said. "We can't get it to find the channels. Would you look at it?" I said I'd come by after work. Unit 23, when I finally stood inside it that evening, was nearly empty. Grocery bags still sealed on the counter, no furniture except one sagging couch and a flat screen propped against the wall on the floor, not even mounted. And the smell. Up close, it wasn't damp. It wasn't mildew. It was that same sweet, spoiled thing from the stairwell. Thick enough now that I found myself breathing through my mouth without deciding to. The old woman sat on the couch with her back to me the entire time, motionless, while I crouched by the TV running the channel scan. At one point, a fly landed on her cheek and walked, unhurried, toward the corner of her eye. She didn't blink, didn't twitch. I told myself later that some people just don't feel that kind of thing. My own grandmother had gone that still near the end, nerves worn down to nothing. It's the kind of thing you can talk yourself past if you want to badly enough. I wanted to badly enough. Stan thanked me when I left, offered tea, which I declined, and I noticed, only in hindsight, lying in this cell turning the memory over and over, that it was backwards. New tenants don't usually offer hospitality to the guy who's doing them a favor. Usually it runs the other way. That night, the sound came again. Heavier. Longer. And I lay there, exactly like I had the night before, refusing to get up and check, because getting up and checking felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit yet. 2 nights after that, the door slamming started. Not a slam, a rhythm. Open, closed. Open, closed. For most of an hour, the front door of Unit 23 going like a metronome nobody had asked for, while the stairwell light, which had worked fine for 2 years, sat dead in its socket. I went down to see who was doing it, half convinced it was Stan losing his grip on something. Dementia, maybe, and I could at least tell him gently that he was keeping the building up. It was the old woman. Standing in the open doorway at the bottom of the stairs, opening and closing the door with both hands, over and over, not looking at me, not looking at anything. I said her name. I didn't actually know it, so I just said, "Hey," and got nothing. I pulled out my phone and turned the flashlight on her face to get her attention. She hissed. Not a word. Not a sound a person makes. A flat, wet hiss. And then she wasn't walking back inside so much as she was gone, folded back through the doorway too fast for the motion to make sense. And the deadbolt turned from the inside a half-second later. I stood in that dark stairwell for a long time. Nobody else in the building had come out. Either everyone was asleep or everyone had already learned, the way you learn not to touch a hot stove twice, that it was better not to look. That's when Kyle came down. Kyle lived across the hall from me, a decade at the mill outside town, married to Erin, brand new father to a baby boy he still hadn't quite stopped being amazed by. We weren't close, exactly, but we were the kind of neighbors who end up sharing a smoke on a bad night, which is what we did, standing in the cold outside the entrance, both of us pretending the cigarette was the reason our hands weren't steady. "Didn't even know new people moved in up there," Kyle said. I told him what I'd just seen. He didn't laugh it off the way I expected. Said Erin had left that afternoon to visit a friend across town and hadn't come home yet. Nearly midnight now. He'd called the friend. She said Erin left around 6 on foot, said she'd catch the bus. No bus driver remembered her. No friend had seen her since. We stood there a while longer, not saying much, both of us aware the smell from the stairwell had followed us outside. Erin never came home. I helped Kyle knock on doors for 2 days straight. The Friends building, the bus loop, a rundown house on the edge of town where a rumor said kids partied, and sometimes worse. We went. It was exactly the kind of place that rumor promises. Mattresses on the floor, candle wax on every surface, a host too thin and too twitchy to be having a good time on whatever he was on. Erin wasn't there, but chalked crudely on the living room wall was a black sun, a circle with jagged rays, and a line struck through the center. And when I asked about it, the host's eyes went someplace else entirely. "Keeps the neighbors out," he said, like that answered anything, and wouldn't say another word. We drove out along the highway, too, on a tip from a cousin of Erin's, who thought she'd seen someone matching her description walking the shoulder near the Petro-Canada outside town, hitching or just wandering, hard to say which from a moving car. We stopped at that gas station twice, showed her photo to a clerk who barely looked up from his phone, checked the ditch on both sides for a half-kilometer in either direction, like we'd know what we were looking for if we found it. We didn't find anything. Kyle bought 2 coffees at the Tim Hortons across the road and didn't drink either of them, just held his like it was keeping his hands from doing something worse. By the second week, people at my job had started asking why I looked the way I looked. I told my supervisor I wasn't sleeping well, which was true, and left it there because the rest of it didn't survive being said out loud in a break room under fluorescent light. I caught myself doing it more than once, starting a sentence about the noise, the smell, the woman on the stairs, and hearing how it sounded before I got 3 words in, and swallowing the rest. A week after Erin vanished, Kyle vanished too. His door was found wide open, soup going cold on the stove, tea spilled and never wiped up, his only pair of work boots still by the door, like he'd stepped out in socks and simply not come back. His son was crying alone in the crib in the next room, and nobody, not the building, not the police, not me, standing frozen in that doorway, could explain how a man vanishes out of his own kitchen mid-meal without anyone hearing a thing through walls thin enough to carry a cough 2 units over. The baby went to live with Kyle's father. It was the only arrangement anyone could make. I stopped sleeping properly after that. Not from the noise, though the noise kept coming. That same slow, deliberate pacing overhead, night after night, like someone endlessly measuring a room they already knew the size of. I stopped sleeping because I'd started doing the math on how many people I actually knew who were still around. I found Mrs. Doyle, the building's caretaker, sorting mail in the lobby one afternoon, and asked her straight out how long Unit 23 had actually been occupied, and whether she knew of anyone else who'd gone missing. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice had dropped to something just above a whisper. 5, she said. Since the fall. That I know of. She glanced toward the stairs like they might be listening. The department asked me not to say anything. Didn't want folks in a panic. I asked if she'd ever actually seen anyone move into 23A. Furniture, boxes, a truck. She shook her head slowly. Just heard they were up there. Saturday morning, someone knocked with real urgency, and I opened the door to Constable Danny Whitfield, who I'd known since grade school, and who was standing on my mat now in a uniform that made the whole thing feel like it belonged to somebody else's life. Over coffee, he told me, off the record, more than he should have. Kyle had been found, in the bush off the old logging road, hanged, dead for the better part of a week already. And the night before, someone had broken into the group home where Kyle's baby had briefly been placed before going to his father. Only the baby had been taken. Every other child in the building was untouched. No camera worked that night, though every camera had worked the night before and every night since. The window was broken in from the outside, no footprints in the mud below it. Just long scratches gouged into the floor, and a small cross made of green branches, left exactly where the crib had stood empty. Danny leaned in and told me the part he really shouldn't have, that the marks on Kyle's neck were wrong for a hanging. Too wide. Positioned like someone's hands had already done the work before the rope ever went on. For show. He said the real number of disappearances tied to the building wasn't 2, like the official file said, but climbing every week, and that they were keeping it quiet to avoid a panic. They weren't sure they could stop, even if they tried. A family 2 floors below me, a pair of retirees from the next building over. He told me to keep my mouth shut about all of it, and then he told me quietly that a cruiser was parked outside Kyle's father's house now, in case whoever took the baby came back for him too. I tried to break my lease that week. The landlord said, no, full year, signed, and a 2-month penalty if I broke it early. Money I didn't have after losing my bonus at work. I asked about a temporary sublet instead, anything to get one street away for a while. And he told me flatly that wasn't how the contract worked either. I remember standing in his office on Main Street with my hands flat on his desk, trying to explain, in words that sounded thinner every second I used them, that something was wrong in that building, and watching his face settle into the polite, closed expression of a man deciding I was somebody's problem, but not his. I was stuck in that building with whatever was living above me, and everyone who might have believed me was already gone. The noise upstairs stopped pretending to be furniture. Glass breaking at odd hours. Running footsteps at 3 a.m., fast, in a space too small to run in. Stan knocked on my door once more that week, cheerful, inviting me up to share something his wife had made too much of. I could smell it from the hallway before he finished the sentence, and I told him I'd already eaten. He looked at me a beat too long before he said fine, and went back up, and I stood there with my back against my own door until I heard his upstairs. The television lost its signal again a few nights later, a real problem this time. The antenna wire running up through the building to the roof access. I got the attic key from the old dresser on the top landing where it had always been kept, and started up the stairwell in the dark because the lights were still dead on every floor that mattered. Someone was walking above me, matching me. Step for step, exactly a half-second behind, like an echo that had learned to keep time. I told myself it was Stan. I kept climbing anyway. At the top landing, I heard a hard bang from 23 below, and I let myself believe one more time that it was just the old woman acting up. Then a child started crying. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, rising up through the stairwell like it was climbing toward me, and I stood frozen with my hand on the attic door until the crying was right beside me, close enough to touch, and I turned my phone light straight at it. Nothing. The crying stopped the instant the light hit, not faded, stopped, like someone had cut the sound with a switch. And still, in the dark, past the edge of the beam, I felt watched, the way you feel a hand about to land on your shoulder. I went into the attic because the alternative was standing in that stairwell all night. The lock was already open, which I told myself was vandals. My flashlight found the antenna wire chewed clean through, not cut, chewed. The marks too wide and too deep for anything the size of a rat. The attic door slammed shut behind me. No wind to explain it. I froze. Somewhere in the dark past, the beams, something inhaled, slow and deliberate, the way you'd breathe in over a meal you were about to enjoy. The door opened again. Something small and fast darted past my legs with the patter of bare feet on old boards, and an old, papery voice from somewhere behind me said, "There he is." Scared, a second voice answered, pitched like a woman's, but wrong in every way a voice can be wrong. Too slow and too wet. "Good. Bring him down. Don't let him hide." Something closed around my ankle with a grip that didn't belong to anything that size, and the floor started sliding away under me. I grabbed for a beam, and it didn't matter. I was dragged toward the hatch, my voice caught somewhere behind my own teeth, unable to get a scream out. While below me, Stan's voice called up, easy as anything. "What's going on up there, neighbor?" And then, to someone else, "Bring him down, Grandma's made supper." Gary, from the first floor, hollered up the stairwell for us to keep it down. People had work in the morning. And something answered him in a voice that wasn't Stan's anymore, high and delighted. Such naughty children. And I felt more than saw the old man leap from the landing onto the stairwell wall and go down it sideways, joints bending at angles a body isn't built for. His head fixed on me the entire time, his limbs carried him down the concrete, like something with too many more legs than two. There was one short sound from Gary's floor. Then nothing. I hit my head on the stairs going down, and the dark took the rest. I don't want to describe everything I saw when I came back. I've said enough of it in rooms that didn't believe me, and I'm not interested in saying it again for its own sake. I'll say this much. I woke tied to a kitchen chair in Unit 23, and Erin was there. Or what 4 months of that apartment had left of her. And Stan was eating, while his wife made a sound over him that no human throat should be able to produce, urging him on in a voice like something dragged through gravel. And something else came in from the hallway on hands and knees that weren't quite hands and weren't quite knees. Small like an infant and wrong in every proportion, its mouth opening wider than the doorway it had come through. That's where it stops, because that's where I stopped. I don't remember anything else from that apartment. I remember a door coming off its hinges, hands pulling me up off the floor, someone shouting that they had him, they had the guy. I remember trying to say Stan's name, trying to say 23, and getting a fist across the jaw for it instead. And then nothing again until a cell. The trial took 3 days. There wasn't much to argue. The physical evidence put me in that apartment, and no amount of me describing an old man who walked down walls was going to move a jury that had already made up its mind before I opened my mouth. Families of the missing sat in that courtroom and looked at me like I was already less than a person. I understood it. I'd have looked at me the same way, in their seats, hearing the story I was telling. I got the maximum. I stopped arguing my innocence after the 3rd round of questioning, not because I'd accepted it, but because I finally understood nobody in that building was ever going to believe me, and neither was anyone in this one. I'm writing this down now because I don't think they're finished with me. Last night, long after lights out, I heard a child crying in the cell next to mine. The guard on shift told me that cell's been empty for 6 months. I still run the math some nights, lying here. If I'd never buzzed them in that first evening, would Erin still be alive? Would Kyle? Would his son still have 2 parents, instead of a grandfather raising him on memory? Would Mrs. Doyle still be sorting mail in that lobby? Would Gary still be hollering up the stairwell about the noise? Would the other 9 people they eventually found in that basement still be walking around somewhere, complaining about their landlords, buying coffee, not knowing how close they'd come to a building on Alder Street? 15 in the end. That's the number they read out at sentencing. I've stopped correcting the guards who call me by it instead of my name. So take this for whatever it's worth, from someone who's never getting another chance to act on it himself. Check who's really moved in upstairs. Don't just listen for the sound of them. Look for what doesn't move when it should. And if someone offers you tea after you've done them a favor, don't drink it.